long-standing interest in Indian philosophy, especially Vedanta in Germany. Arthur Schopenhauer, the great philosopher, he famously said that he actually read the Upanishads in translation. So there was this young Frenchman, Anquetil Duperron, who went to India and got a Persian translation of the Sanskrit original of the Upanishads with some commentaries. And he read that, and somebody commented that it's only the lynx-like, fox-like intelligence of Schopenhauer who could grasp, who could go to the essence of the teachings of the Upanishads through this multiply translated, very difficult book. And Schopenhauer was so moved, he said that I consider no study in the world more beneficial than these Upanishads, except perhaps the original. And he also further said, these Upanishads are the solace of my life, and they will be the solace of my death. And after he got that book, the Upanishads, he would actually read a few pages every day. And he had a little dog. He named the dog Atman, the soul. And there's a beautiful description of the great philosopher sitting by his fireside, reading the Upanishads, while the translation is the world soul looked up at him devotedly, Atman. Hegel too was interested, though his take on Indian philosophy or the original Indian text was not entirely positive, sometimes negative, rather mixed. That's a very interesting and complicated subject, just like Hegel himself. I asked one of the leading Hegel experts in the world today, as a crazy philosopher, Slavoj Žižek. Some of you have heard about him? Yes, some of us. So he's well known in Germany. I met him a couple of times in New York, and once I spoke with him, and I asked him, in fact, about Hegel. He has written many, many books, Slavoj Žižek, and he always says that I write all these books because I'm lazy. What I should do is write a 500-page book on Hegel. To avoid that, I'm writing all these pot boilers, So I asked him, why is this sometimes a negative, derogatory take on Indian philosophy, sometimes in Hegel? And he thought for a moment and he said, I don't think he really had access to the original sources. He really did have a very genuine understanding of Indian thought about Hegel, he said. Paul Deussen, who became a great scholar and exponent of Vedanta, in fact, what we're going to talk about today. And just yesterday I discovered that he was the classmate of Nietzsche at school. They studied together. So, Meister Eckhart, as Maharaj said, Swamiji said, he mentioned Meister Eckhart. Right now, of course, we must distinguish between Meister Eckhart and Eckhart Tolle. There is a great teacher of the direct path in Advaita Vedanta. And very interestingly, they almost teach the same thing, actually, in a sense, not in detail. Yes, Meister Eckhart is popular among Vedantins. It's very interesting why someone who lived more than 800 years ago in Germany, a monk, would suddenly find popularity among monks and other Vedanta enthusiasts in India. We will see why. That's the subject today. Because of that, I had also read occasionally, once in a while, read Meister Eckhart here and there, though never thoroughly or never systematically. But it's only when revered Swamiji asked me to prepare a talk on Meister Eckhart, Christian mysticism, and Vedanta, that I did a little more study. So, what I did was a couple of books I consulted. One is a very nice, handy, the pocket Meister Eckhart. By the way, Meister Eckhart, although we don't know much about him really, except for his career in the church, but his teachings are well preserved, luckily for us. And a lot of translation has been done. So in English also we have, and I think other languages also. So Meister Eckhart's comprehensive works are available. And this is like a collection of his teachings, very nice, like a pocket, handy Meister Eckhart. This is in English, of course. But the more interesting book I found was this book, Paths to Transcendence, written by an Iranian scholar living in England, Reza Shah Kazemi. Most of his works are on Islam, but this book is very interesting. It is a comparative study of Shankara, of Ibn Arabi, and Meister Eckhart. And the non-dualism you find in Shankara, Advaita Vedanta, which is our tradition, and the non-dualism you find in Islam, in Islamic philosophy, in Ibn Arabi, and the non-dualism you find in Christianity, in Meister Eckhart. One of the things that I discovered, I didn't know it was, but it seems it's common knowledge, he was not one of a kind. I asked a scholar in Belgium just last week, Konrad Elst. I asked him about Meister Eckhart, and he said, no, he's not one of a kind. Maybe he was sort of pioneer, but there are the whole group of what are now called Rhineland mystics in the Christian tradition. And they have some similar teachings. It's not a formal school, but you can classify them together based on these insights which they teach. So this book was also especially useful for me. Now I got these books because not just to show them to you, but also so that I can quote Meister Eckhart precisely. I'll read out parts of it and talk about Vedanta. Before we dive into it, and we'll have some time for question answers at the end. Before we dive into it, a nice anecdote I found in one of these books. It seems once, and this is a true story, somebody asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a Christian scholar asked the Dalai Lama, that in Buddhism the goal is to overcome suffering, and you have such a wonderful system for overcoming suffering. But in Christianity, our emphasis seems to be on focus on pain and suffering. How can you bring them together? So, and his answer was beautiful, the Dalai Lama's answer. He smiled and he said, one does not overcome suffering by leaving pain behind. Rather, one overcomes suffering by taking on pain for the sake of others. And so that person who's writing this, he says, I was so delighted when I heard this. I felt at that moment Jesus and the Buddha embraced. So very beautiful insight. Overcoming suffering, does it mean that you will not have any more pain ever? But that's not true. If we look at the lives of great saints, spiritual masters, it's not that their lives became painless. All life is surrounded by pain, is immersed in suffering. Rather, they found something which enabled them to be fulfilled and in deep peace in the midst of ups and downs of life, in the midst of suffering. And they had this great love and compassion for the rest of us. So they were willing to put up with this suffering, with this pain, for the sake of us, for our sake. And the same insight, I think, can be shared with Vedanta. In Vedanta, we say the goal is attainment of fulfillment, ananda prapti, and overcoming suffering, dukkha nivritti. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what is this enlightenment? Well, being centered in which the heaviest of sorrows cannot shake you. Now, that's very interesting. That means if you're enlightened, it does not mean the sorrow will cease, but it will not be able to shake you anymore. You would have found something so deep that being centered in that, you are at ease with life, at ease in life. If you look at the life of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, Ma Sharada, other Vedanta masters, you see how much they worked for the rest of us. And Sri Ramakrishna, it's like when he is dying of cancer and till the last moment teaching and giving of himself to those who would come to learn. A monk told me, it is like dying on the cross, it's a kind of crucifixion. Swami Vivekananda, he worked himself to death. The reason why we are all here today in Vedanta society is because of Vivekananda. He would say that I won't live to see 40. Why not? Because like burning the candle at both ends, he worked himself to death for the sake of the rest of us. So I like this beautiful synthesis of the Christian approach, the Buddhist approach, and if I may say so, the Vedantist approach, in Dalai Lama saying that one overcomes suffering by taking on pain for the sake of others. So that's the way of overcoming suffering. All right. Meister Eckhart. Just a couple of words about who he was before we move on. He was born approximately, we are not very sure, in Germany. About 12, we are sure about that, he was born in Germany, but the exact date we don't know, about 1260, just after that, sometime after that. And early on, he went to the University of Paris. The Meister is an academic term, by the way, by which term he was known all his life. Although I don't think he was really known that way in his life. Now we know him as Meister Eckhart. Anyway, and he became a monk, one of the ancient orders in Catholic Christianity. It's just Christianity at that time. So the Dominicans. So he was a Dominican friar. And he rose quickly in the church hierarchy because of his, we know of him for his wonderful non-dual teachings, but he was a very popular preacher also in his time. As a speaker, as in his sermons, and also in his guidance to other monastics, monks and nuns. So he was in the Dominicans, with the Dominicans he was in the church in, he was in charge of many religious congregations in Bohemia first, and then he was in Strasbourg, and then he became the prior of Frankfurt. So higher and higher posts. He wrote a number of books, tracts basically. Later, one of the famous tracts by which, in fact, his teachings are identified is the Meister Eckhart, from whom God hid nothing. From whom God. So he is the one who is aware of the deepest secrets of the divine. He got in trouble with the church, and we shall see in these teachings why that might be so. And in fact, he was hauled up by the Vatican and he was put under trial. Luckily, he was not punished in that sense. It was already a formal punishment to be accused of heresy and heretical teachings. But his teachings have survived till today and seen new popularity among in Vedanta circles, in non-dual circles, here in the West, in Europe, in America, also in India. Let's get to the heart of it. Raymond Blackney, who is a translator and scholar of Meister Eckhart, he says, Meister Eckhart was a man of one idea. So it's easy to understand in that sense. What is Meister Eckhart all about, in spite of so many writings and tracts and sermons? He's a man of one idea. What is that idea? He says, one idea, one very great idea, compared to which nothing else seems to matter much. And that idea is the unity of the human and the divine. The unity of the human and the divine. This is what you find a central thrust in Meister Eckhart's teachings. This is literally Advaita Vedanta. In Advaita Vedanta, we speak about, Advaita Vedanta can be expressed very simply in a single sentence. Shankaracharya's famous Brahman is real, the world is an appearance, and you, the sentient being, you are Brahman. Sentient being is Brahman. See the identity of the human and the divine. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jiva Brahmaivanapara. You, the sentient being, you're nothing other than Brahman. In the Upanishads, we find these statements called the Mahavakyas, or great statements. And great, why? Because they express the whole teaching of Vedanta in one sentence. And it's very elegant actually. Such a vast literature, stretching across thousands of years. But you can express it, the heart of it, in one sentence. What is that sentence? Tat Tvamasi, you are that. That you are. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. I am Atma Brahma, this very self is Brahman. Prajnanam Brahma, this consciousness is Brahman. All of them are basically this exactly same idea, the unity of the human and the divine. And that's what Meister Eckhart was doing. The moment you do this, it sounds very cool, as Americans would say, very nice. But the moment you do this, if you reflect upon it, you see the insurmountable difficulty. It sounds nice, but if you just think a little bit about it, theologically it creates havoc. It is either it is utterly meaningless, or it is blasphemous, or it is just plain crazy, megalomaniac. If you say, I am God, this is what it means, I am God. It's megalomania, it's just not true. How can I be God? Theologically speaking, if you say the God and the human are one, are divine, one in divine essence, how? Just consider, it's like saying that a mountain and a little pebble are one. How? How are they one? God is omniscient, all-knowing. Am I all-knowing? Are we all-knowing? Obviously not. God is, even with the internet and ChatGPT and Google, still we are not all-knowing. God is omnipresent, everywhere. Are we everywhere? Of course not. I'm here and only in this chair, and you are in this, we are in the same hall, but you are in that chair and not this chair. So we are very limited. We are here only in this body, and God is supposed to be everywhere. How are we one with God? God is supposed to be all-powerful, omnipotent. Are we all-powerful? We are very weak creatures. We are very weak and vulnerable creatures. So God is all the omnis, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, all-knowing. We are little knowing. God is all-powerful. We have very little power. God is everywhere. We are only here, located in one body, embodied. Literally nothing matches. Two things could not be further apart than the human and the divine. How are you saying that they are one? Logically not possible. It's contradictory to say that they are one. And this is where Advaita Vedanta develops, and Meister Eckhart too develops his teachings. This is the doorway into the teachings of Meister Eckhart. This contradiction. The human and divine cannot be one. They are distinct and different in so many ways. How are they one? Listen to Meister Eckhart. He sounds exactly like the Upanishads here. He says, the ground of God and the ground of my soul are one and the same ground. A very, very interesting statement from a Vedantic perspective. If you give a statement like, you are that, Tattvamasi, to Vedanta, the Vedantic machinery, philosophical machinery will get to work on it. How do we interpret this? And the way they find out is exactly what Meister Eckhart is saying. The ground of God and the ground of my soul are one and the same ground. That's how we are one. What does this mean? Let's delve a little bit into Vedanta. We'll crisscross back between Meister Eckhart and Vedanta and hope to get more light on it. Keep the question in mind that there is a mountainous difference between the human and the divine, between us and God. What is the meaning of the statement that the human and the divine are one? You are that, or I am Brahman. What is the meaning of that statement? To find the meaning of that statement, Advaita Vedanta takes up these statements and does a hermeneutical study, a philosophical study, also epistemological study of this statement. In Vedanta, this is called Mahavakyartha Vichara, an inquiry into the meaning of the great sentence. You are that, I am Brahman, an inquiry into the meaning. What's the problem here? The two terms, you and that. You, that. You meaning the person, the individual being, the student who is learning Vedanta. In the original source, Chandogya Upanishad, it is the young boy Shvetaketu who came back from school, graduated from school, came back proud of his knowledge. And his father saw that this knowledge has just made this young man arrogant. So he asked this thunderbolt of a question. My son, have they taught you that in school, by knowing which everything is known? The one thing by knowing which everything is known. Now, Shvetaketu said, no. And how is that even possible? By knowing one thing, you know one thing only. I mean, by knowing physics, you know physics. By knowing Sanskrit grammar, you know Sanskrit grammar. By knowing one thing, you can't know everything. You know only that subject domain. How is it even possible? And no, they did not teach me. And he says, why don't you teach me? There's little arrogance there. And the commentator Shankaracharya says he was afraid of being sent back to school again. So, so he says, you teach me. And then the whole teaching starts, and his father tells him, you are that, Tattvamasi. Before the beginning of this universe, there was only existence. I'm saying all this because you'll see the same thing reflected in Meister Eckhart. Before all things were, there was only that. What was that? Pure being or existence only. Meister Eckhart will use the term the naked being, just being itself. And from that comes this entire universe. Still, imagine, our Shvetaketu is a teenager, so you might as well shrug and say, okay, so what? And then his father says, you are that, Tattvamasi. Now when it's about you, you can't ignore it. You are that. Shvetaketu says, I didn't get it, explain it to me again. And his father does so 9 times. In that chapter, the 6th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishads, 9 times the same teaching is given, you are that, 9 times, Tattvamasi, Tattvamasi. And for the next 1,000, 2,000 years, non-dual philosophers have been working on this statement. How do you reconcile the difference? That which is at the source of the universe, from which the entire universe has been created. That's the classic definition of God in all the theistic religions, religions which believe in God. One common definition of God is the creator. The Brahma Sutras, Janmadhyasya yataha, the origin, existence and destruction of the universe is from that, and that is Brahman. So that's the operational definition of God. I'm using these words carefully, because that's not, Meister Eckhart and Vedanta will go deeper. They will find something deeper there. So that is God. And you, who are you? You are this embodied being, this sentient being right now. You are born on such and such date. You are in this physical body which is aging. One day it will die. So how can you be that? All right. Now the way to do this is to find something deeper than that and you. The two things can become one, not as they exist. A mountain high wave and a drop in the ocean, they cannot be one. But you'll immediately say, both are water. As water, they are one. Similarly, an emperor and a beggar cannot be the same. But when we see a skilled actor on, like a play on Broadway or something, he comes out in 2 different roles as an emperor, and then he comes out again to play the role of a beggar. And if we say the emperor is the beggar or the beggar is the emperor, it's true. Not in their roles, not as a beggar, not as an emperor, but what you mean is the emperor is not really ultimately an emperor, the beggar is not really ultimately a beggar, both are one and the same actor, who in his real nature is neither an emperor nor a beggar. Are you with me so far? You must find something which is deeper than that and you, deeper than God, greater than God, transcending God, and at the same time deeper or greater or transcending the individual sentient being, in Sanskrit jiva. Now if you look at Meister Eckhart, the ground of my soul and the ground of God are one and the same ground. He's talking about something deeper than God, the ground of God, something deeper than our individual personality, the ground of my soul, and talking about them as if they are identical. So, the way to establish this identity is not to say directly that I am God and stop there. That is meaningless. That's obviously untrue. In fact, there is centuries of debate in India between the dualistic schools of Vedanta and the non-dualistic schools of Vedanta. The dualistic schools of Vedanta say there is an impassable, unbridgeable difference between the divine and the human. And to say I am God is the worst blasphemy possible. So Madhva Vedanta, the dualistic schools of Vedanta in India, They will always charge us, the non-dualists, with blasphemy, one of the charges. Many charges. You're illogical, you're stupid, but also blasphemous. That you are committing the ultimate blasphemy. You're saying as a mere mortal creature you are claiming to be God. Incredible. This is totally false and it's blasphemous. It's wrong. This is the response. I'm not saying that I, Meister Eckhart, am God. Obviously not. But the true I, which is in me, my deepest spiritual being, which is what I really am, and what God really is, they are one and the same thing, is making that movement. In Vedanta, this becomes even more clear. What Vedanta does is that there is some reality which transcends God, the individual beings, and this world. There is this triangle, Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. Jiva means sentient beings like us, and Jagat means this world. Ishvara means God. And this is where religion stops really. Here is the world, God is the creator, and we are all controlled by God. So this individual beings like us, the world and God. Vedanta says there is a deeper reality to this triangle. There is one ultimate reality which appears as the God of religion, which appears as the world we inhabit, and which appears as us. And that Vedanta calls Nirguna Brahman, the attributeless absolute. With all blessed attributes, all powerful, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, that absolute becomes the God of religion. With miserable attributes, mortal, sinful, small, ignorant, powerless, that absolute becomes the individual being like us. And with some other names and forms, that absolute appears as this world. But underlying the world, underlying God, underlying the sentient beings like us, there is an absolute reality. And Vedanta goes and talks about what it is. It says that that reality is pure being. We'll see Meister Eckhart again and again uses the same language. And it's beautiful that Meister Eckhart does so. One might say, did he read Vedanta? No. Absolutely, there is simply no evidence of that. The Upanishads in translation reached only in Schopenhauer's time, just 300 years ago, or 200 to 300 years ago, not 800 years ago. He came to the same conclusion purely from Christian sources and mainly from his own spiritual experience. And that's why it's beautiful, I think. If you're the same textual sources, it's possible you can come to the same interpretations. You may agree or disagree on interpretations. But that you independently, thousands of miles away, oceans across from India and in Germany, you have spiritual minds of the highest caliber coming to the same conclusions about the ultimate reality. That's beautiful, I think. That's incredible. So he also comes to the same language. What is that ultimate reality? It is existence itself, Sat. It is consciousness itself, Chit. It is bliss itself, Ananda. Think about it. What are the greatest questions that we have ever had in humanity? The greatest questions of philosophy. Three main questions and three branches of philosophy. One question is, what is real? Things exist. So what is the ultimate reality? That's one question. What is real? Is mind real? Is matter real? Is God real? Is the world real? Are superstrings or black holes real? Are numbers real? Is Harry Potter real? What is real? That branch which deals with this question is called, that branch of philosophy is called metaphysics. Nowadays, more fancy name, ontology. Ontos means being, so ontology. And immediately when we make such claims, God, Brahman, or or black holes, or Harry Potter, the question will be, how do you know? On what basis are you making these claims? This is a question which is called epistemology. How do you know anything? How is knowledge possible? So that's the second great branch of philosophy, which deals with the question of knowledge. How do we know? Because once one can make any claim, very quickly we will go from claims of metaphysics to epistemological question. We would want to know, how did you know this? Do you believe it? If you believe it, on what grounds do you believe it? Do you have, is it from a text? Is it from a teacher? Is it from experience? Is it from logic? What? Then there's a third question, third branch of philosophy. There's a question of what's the point of all this? What is the purpose? What is the goal? Is there any goal at all? Is there a purpose? And what is the purpose? What is good? What should we do? What is right? What is wrong? All these questions, they were studied in branches called ethics, aesthetics. Now there is an umbrella term, axiology. It's not very popular, but axiology, study of values. Why I am saying this? Now look back upon the Vedantic formulation of the ultimate reality. Sat-Chit-Ananda. What is the ultimate reality? Being itself, existence itself. And here we will see Meister Eckhart agrees entirely. How do we know anything? How is knowledge possible? Chit, because of pure consciousness, of consciousness itself. And what's the purpose, ultimate goal, value of anything at all? And Vedanta says Ananda, bliss. And then Vedanta goes on to say, these three are not three separate things. They are one reality. They are not even attributes of one reality. Because what we are talking about here does not have attributes. It is that one reality. That reality is being itself. We'll see how Eckhart puts it very eloquently. It is consciousness itself. It is bliss or fulfillment itself. So this is the Vedantic idea of the ultimate reality. All of this to prove or to show how are you trying to answer this fundamental contradiction? When you're saying unity of the human and the divine, what is the way out? Directly the sentence doesn't make sense. You are that, does not make sense. Then how will you make it make sense? Then you have to investigate the individual. Who am I? You have to investigate God. Who is God or what is God? And you will, Meister Eckhart says, you will find something deeper in both. Now let's look at Meister Eckhart directly. He says, I'm quoting here, for goodness and wisdom and whatever may be attributed to God are all admixtures. They're mixtures. They're admixtures to God's naked essence. For all admixture causes alienation from essence. Precisely and beautifully put. God's reality, naked essence here means the reality of God, the ultimate reality. What is God actually? And when you attribute, God is all powerful, God is good, God is beautiful, God is kind, or the omnis, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, he says these are already mixtures. This is not what God is in reality. It is like that actor who puts on the robes of an emperor, of a king. Still the same actor. But now you will say king or emperor, or then puts on the tattered robes of the beggar. Same actor, but now our eyes are on the beggar's robes. We say king, God. Same, what he calls the naked essence, dressed up with omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresence, with all the blessed qualities of love and goodness and justice and kindness and beauty and power. All of that. Here he goes on to say, those are not essential. In fact, those are mixtures. And then he says, if you mix these things with the reality of God, with God's naked essence, you will alienate that reality from itself. You will create something which is a little distant from the ultimate reality. This is another beautiful way of putting the difference between Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. Brahman without attributes. Pure being itself. Now you dress it up in attributes. God has power. God is all-knowing, all-powerful, present, all true, present everywhere. But notice what you are doing. The moment you say all-knowing, there is something for God to know then. When you say all-powerful, power is meaningful only when there is something to do. So there is something for God to do. Present, omnipresent. Present everywhere all the time. That means you are admitting space and time. So you've already brought the absolute down into creation now and dressed it up. And now you call it the God of religion. This in Vedanta, the precise terms are there. The absolute, Brahman, which literally, the word Brahman literally means the vast, limitless. And then you dress it up with all power and attributes, and you call it Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes. Another name for Saguna Brahman in Sanskrit is Ishvara, Bhagavan, and the corresponding term in English would be God. So, you see, why does Meister Eckhart make this move? Because it serves the ultimate purpose of the oneness of the divine and the human. Actor dressed up as king, actor dressed up as beggar. Beggar and king cannot be the same thing. But remove the role of the beggar, remove the role of the king, same actor. In Christianity, the idea of God is somewhat a different idea. Is there the Trinitarian God, the Catholic doctrine of Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I've seen Vedantins, including myself, a Father, yes, God. Son, yes, incarnation of God. Like Rama and Krishna. Holy Ghost, puzzling. Vedantins, what is this Holy Ghost? So some sort of try to force fit it with Maya maybe. But the Catholic doctrine is a little different from that. Meister Eckhart, he uses this doctrine, the Trinity, as a doorway into the Absolute. Listen to Meister Eckhart. If you say things like this, the immediate theological response to Meister Eckhart would be, no, what are you talking about? God is Father, Son, Holy Ghost. What is all this absolute and naked essence of God? What are you talking about? Now he says, Meister Eckhart, for anyone who could grasp distinctions without number and quantity, 100 would be as one. Even if there were 100 persons in the Godhead, a man who could distinguish without number and quantity would perceive them only as one God. And this is very delicately poised, because yes, those who study theology, they will know. This is traditional Christian theology, that though they are three, Trinity, they are three in one. But now he's asking the question, what could be that one which could be Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and you remove those distinctions, that one would still exist. What is that one? He's asking that question. And then he investigates. So what is that one? He calls it a citadel, a fort. So truly one and simple. These words are not very simple. He uses the word simple. So truly one and simple is this citadel. So mode and power transcending is this solitary one. Mode means various qualities. One mode is God, the Creator. Another mode is God as the Son. Another mode is God as the Holy Ghost. And power. Each have different kinds of power. But this one transcends these modes and power. He calls it the solitary one with capital O. That neither power nor mode has gone into it, or can gaze into it. Not even God himself. God never looks in there for one instant. So this is Meister Eckhart's very powerful and provocative language. God never looks in there for one instant insofar as he exists in modes and in the properties of his persons. For God to see inside it would cost him all his divine names and personal properties. For all these he must leave outside. This is a very powerful way of putting, if Saguna Brahman, in Vedanta you use the words are very powerful, you can use it already, they are loaded. Saguna Brahman, Bhagavan, Ishvara, God, if God were to turn inwards and realize, I am limitless being, consciousness, bliss, immediately the attributes of God would drop off and he would remain as the Nirguna Brahman. Not that God will disappear. Just as we, here is the clue to our liberation, if we realize, oh, I am not the body, not the mind, I am pure consciousness, then what happens? Do I disappear? No. I remain as pure consciousness. Imagine Shankaracharya singing, very popular verse we all sing, 6 stanzas on liberation. Shivoham, Shivoham, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. But before that, what does he say? I am not the mind. I am not the intellect. I am not the ego. I am not the memory. And then only he can say, I am pure consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. In Sanskrit, Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham nacha shrotra jivhe nacha ghrana netre nacha vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayu chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. I am not the mind, I am not the intellect, I am not the memory, I am not the ego. That means I am not this person at all. How interesting to say I am not the ego. It literally means I am not I. And then I am not the senses. I am not the body made of earth, fire, water. Then only he can say, I am pure consciousness. I am bliss. I am Shiva. Just as that happens to us when we extract ourselves from the body, mind, personality, the same thing happens to God. God loses his, in Vedanta, of course, it could be his, it could be her, it could be its divine personality, powers, and gains what? Gains its infinite, limitless nature, beyond language and description. But he puts it very provocatively here. Listen to what he says. If God sees that nature, his own nature, it would cost him all his divine names and personal properties. For all these he must leave outside. But only insofar as he is one and indivisible can he do this. In this sense, he is neither Father, nor Son, nor Holy Ghost, and yet is a something which is neither this nor that. He's talking about Nirguna Brahman here. Those who study Vedanta, they will say what is going on here, there's a name for it, there's a formal name. There's a whole procedure which is students of Vedanta learn. They call it Tat Pada Vichara, an inquiry into the term that. In order to understand, you are that, we must first inquire into you. Who am I? And we must inquire into that. What is that? Then we will see both are one and the same. And what's going on here, a non-dualist or Vedantin will say, this is inquiry into that. It's inquiry into what that is. And what do you do next? You inquire into who you are. Exactly what Meister Eckhart does. This is quite delightful actually to read this. Now he says, come to myself. He says, while I yet stood in my first cause, in my real nature, he says, I had no God and was my own cause. See, the religious perspective is God is the cause. So the cause of this world and a creature like me, God is the cause. But when I go to my real nature, I find I have no cause. I am my own cause. And I have no God at that point. At that point, what happens? He says, I wanted nothing and desired nothing. For, why did you not desire anything? For I was bare being. And these are the terms which he loves. This is exactly equivalent to the Sanskrit Sat, existence itself, bare being. I was bare being and the knower of myself in the enjoyment of truth. I am interpreting this as Chit, pure awareness. I was free of God and all things. Let me repeat that. In that ultimate nature, I am free of all things, and therefore I am free of God. You might say, what do you mean you're free of God? In the sense, God's godliness consists in rulership over the universe. If there is no universe, what is the meaning of God? What is he or she or it the God of? Who is he the God of? There's nobody else. So not that God doesn't exist. God exists as that reality which you experience as yourself, becomes one there. I was free of God and all things. But when I left my freedom behind and received my created being, that is body and mind, then what happens? Then I had a God. When the moment that limitless existence, consciousness, bliss becomes this fellow, Meister Eckhart, then that limitless existence, consciousness, bliss also becomes the God of Meister Eckhart. For before there were creatures, God was not God. Before you have the universe, before you have us, God is not God. Not that God does not exist, but God is not what you will call God. He was that which he was. It's very biblical. I am that I am. But when creatures came into existence and received their created being, names and forms in Vedantic terms, or bodies and minds, then God was not God in himself, he was God in creatures. This is what we call God in religion. This is the analysis of, in Vedanta we'll say this is Tvam Pada Vichara. What are we really? Are we this, what he calls the created being, body mind? Other than created being, other than body mind, what am I? I am this witness consciousness or bare existence. And then he says, this knowledge is the liberating knowledge. This realization is the liberating realization. He puts this non-dual realization above theistic religion. And again, provocative language. He will say, even a fly will not be fulfilled by knowing God, let alone human beings like us. You must come to this realization ultimately. Look at this, this language, shocking language. God, as much as he is God, that means within quotes, this God of religion, is not the supreme goal of creatures. If a fly had reason and could intellectually plumb the eternal abysm of God's being out of which it has come, we would have to say to that God, with all that makes him God, would be unable to fulfill and satisfy that fly. He's saying the God of religion is not enough to even satisfy a little fly, let alone other beings. He's not blaspheming here. He's saying the nature of that fly and the nature of God is ultimately that absolute. That has to be realized. And then he talks about the difference between God and Godhead. In our terms, Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. He says, God and Godhead are as different as heaven and earth. God becomes and unbecomes. God works, and Godhead does no work. There is nothing for it to do. There is no activity in it. It never peeped at any work. The language is, it never peeped. God never even had the slightest glimpse of any activity. See, this is the idea of God which we have in religion. That God is the creator, preserver in Vedanta. Creator, preserver, destroyer of the world, is the creator of the universe. That's a lot of work. In Vedanta you will say, actually it is God who works, even through all of us. In Gita, yatah pravritti bhutanam, where all the activities of all beings, the source of all of that is God. And yet he says the absolute has no work. It is only when the absolute comes into the realm of creation of the universe, living beings and God, then there is tremendous activity. But go beyond that, where there's no creation, no preservation, no destruction. The Hindus talk of a cycle of existence, then destruction, and a new creation, and existence, and destruction, and so on. Sounds like lots and lots of work. Now even Doge is there, so in America. So they ask everybody, what did you do in the last 6 days? Sunday you're allowed to rest, like God. So they would give a message to God also, email you should send every week. What are you doing? Otherwise dismissed. Now God will be very happy. Have you heard there's a word now called doged, Department of Government Efficiency. If I lose my job, what happened to you? Doged. Yes. So here Meister Eckhart has doged God. God is dismissed. What it means is that there is a higher reality beyond God as the creator, preserver, destroyer of the universe. God has no activity in it. This is in Sanskrit, this is called Nishkriya or Abhyavaharya. The ultimate reality is beyond transaction, beyond use. That's why I joke sometimes, the absolute is useless, and that's a good thing. Use means imperfection. Activity means something is there to be accomplished. It means imperfection. The moment you say there is activity, there is imperfection, there is something to be accomplished, power is necessary. We think God is omnipotent, all-powerful. That's a great thing. You're admitting the weakness of God then. God is less than perfect if you say God is all-powerful. What is the use of power if nothing has to be done? No use at all. So in the absolute, nothing has to be done. But this is the beautiful thing. Both have to be held together. And Meister Eckhart does very beautifully. Yes, this world, this is real. But beyond this is a deeper reality, where it's the absolute, nothing has to be done. And therefore, to speak of God with all the power of God and the activity of God, completely meaningless there. He says. Beautiful. Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman. It's only with respect to Saguna Brahman, Brahman with activity, that you talk about creation, preservation and destruction of this universe. Just one more point. Another beautiful quote, I must quote this here. His language is very powerful. He says, God is nothing. Then he says, stop, before you get shocked. Not in the sense of having no being. He is neither this nor that one can speak of. Neither this nor that one can speak of. He is being above all being. He is beingless being. What is beingless being? Existence without being an existing thing. What do I mean by existing thing? If you take an inventory, audit, there is this table, there is the glass, there is the microphone, there is the Swami, there is this room, this is inventory. In this inventory, will you find God? Will there be one more thing called God? He says, no. So God does not exist, non-existent? He says, no. God is that because of which all of these things exist. God is existence without being an existent thing. That is what he means by God is beingless being. Again, the Sanskrit word Sat, pure being. I think Meister Eckhart would have been delighted if he had got the copy of the Upanishads, but he was 400 years too early. It would have pleased his heart to see what he was talking about, said in a different way, but very logically worked out and in a mainstream philosophy. One more point, and then we will let this go. He actually talks about Nirvikalpa Samadhi here. He says, see, there is a story. Sri Ramakrishna, he worshipped God as mother. For him, God was Kali. And in deep meditative trances, through meditative practices, he had the vision of Kali, living vision of God as mother of the universe. But when he got his non-dual master, Totapuri, the wandering monk, who told him, go beyond all of this. And he showed him how. Beyond names and forms, beyond subject and object. I am meditating on God. I am having the vision. I am Ramakrishna having the vision of Kali. Go beyond this. This is still subject and object. And Sri Ramakrishna found he could not do it. Because his mind would come to Kali and stop there. And actually, see, it's not just a concept for him. It's a living presence. He would come to the living presence of God who wants to go beyond that. But his master said, you have to go beyond that. And this author, he quotes Meister Eckhart and then gives a footnote. Meister Eckhart says, you rejoice too much in my present form. This is God speaking. And therefore the joy of the Holy Ghost cannot be yours. Now Meister Eckhart says, leave all images and unite with the formless essence. Then the footnote. This recalls the final act performed by Ramakrishna before attaining Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This is from the footnote in this book. Unable to go beyond the vision of Mother Kali in his attempt at concentrating on the self, with a firm determination I sat for meditation again, and as soon as the holy form of the Divine Mother appeared now before my mind as previously, I looked upon knowledge as a sword and cut it mentally in two with the sword of knowledge. There remained then no function in the mind which transcended quickly the realm of names and forms, making me merge in Samadhi. He is quoting from Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. So, in that, an experience of non-duality, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I have run out of time, but, oh no, more. Let me share a couple of things. This is all high philosophy, the unity of the divine and the human. But he was a great spiritual director in practical spiritual matters also, Meister Eckhart. One or two of his beautiful teachings, let me share. Work and contemplation. This Meister Eckhart. Meister Eckhart said that no person in this life may reach the point at which he can be excused from service. Even if he is given to a life of contemplation, meditation, still he cannot refrain from going out and taking an active part in life. Those who are given to the life of contemplation and avoid activities, they deceive themselves and are on the wrong track. I say that contemplative person should indeed avoid even the thought of deeds to be done during the period of his meditation, during contemplation. But afterward he should get busy. For no one can or should engage in contemplation all the time. For active life is to be a respite from contemplation. We think meditation is a rest, so how much work is there? He says, no, your work is the rest. Meditation is the work for you. Your service is the rest you will get. And he says, why people don't get joy in spiritual life. He says, people take it as a drudgery. If one can taste the divine sweetness, he says, if they get no taste of divine sweetness, they drag. But if a man lies in wait until he gets the taste of the divine, afterwards he is always a glad seeker of God. I like this because Swami Smarananandaji Maharaj, who was the president of our order before the current president, who was the last president of our order, he would tell us novices, we used to attend classes, he would say not only the goal, but the journey must be joyful. It's only when it is sweet and pleasant. Yes, ultimately God realization, fine. But on the way of meditation, the way of service, the way of devotion, the way of knowledge, all these must be filled with joy and sweetness and gladness. Then it's very easy to proceed along it. One more and I will stop. This is a very beautiful one. Eckhart said, there are 5 things. Whoever has them is a sure sign he will never lapse from God. 5 things. If you have them, you are safe. You will reach God ultimately and you will never fall back. 5. 1. Though the most grievous things befall this man, never a murmur does he make. No word but praise and thanks is ever heard. No grumbling. You don't have a right to grumble if you are spiritual. Number 2. Second. At the most trying times, he never says one word in his excuse. Never tries to defend himself. Third, this man desires of God what God will freely give and nothing else. He leaves it all to him. Never one thing more than what God has given freely. No prayer for oneself. Fourth, nothing in heaven or earth can ruffle him. So settled is his calm that heaven and earth in topsy-turvydom would leave him quite content in God. He has found such a deep peace that nothing in this life shakes him. Swami Vivekananda said, let nothing disturb our serenity. That's a practice. Last, nothing in heaven or earth can cheer him. For having reached the point where nothing in heaven and earth can sadden him, so neither can it gladden him, except as trifles come. Yeah, good thing happens, I'm happy that it happened. Bad thing happens, I'm unhappy that it happened. But deeply inside, I'm centered in God. I do not depend upon the world for my happiness. This is literally Bhagavad Gita. I was thinking, Arjuna asks the same question. How do we know when our wisdom is settled? You see what Meister Eckhart says, will never lapse from God. Sthita prajna, wisdom is settled. Then there are 2 verses which Krishna says to Arjuna. Dukkheshu anudvigna mana, sukheshu vigatas priya, vitaraga bhayakrodha, sthitadi muni ruchyate. The sage is said to be of settled knowledge, enlightenment, who is unperturbed in sorrow and does not grasp when he is in joy or things are going very well. What do we try to do? Preserve it, increase it, hold on to it. Does not grasp. Literally what Meister Eckhart is saying. Yes, sarvatra anabhisneya tat tat prapya shubha shubham. Sukham va yadi va dukkham sav yogi paromata. No, this the 57th verse is yona rishyati na dveshti. What is that verse? Yona abhinandati na dveshti tat tat prapya shubha shubham. That verse is there. 50. Ya sarvatra anabhisneya tat tat prapya shubha shubham. Na abhinandati na dveshti. When all the time, in all circumstances, is calm and does not react. See, not a one word of complaint will be there when things do not go well, ashubha. And when things go well, no grasping. He says even things on the earth and heaven cannot gladden him also. There is no grasping for things to go well. Literally, I feel we are reading the Bhagavad Gita here. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Thank you for your patient hearing. If you have one or two questions, we can take some questions. How do you do that? You raise your hand? We have a microphone? Yes, you have to be aggressive in raising your hand so that he can see you. Yes, go there.
Pranam Swamiji.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you.
My name is Vipan, and my question is about the mixing that you described, the mixing, the individual. So my question was why this mixing happens at all? Like why is this individual popping up again and again? After every minute it pops up again and again. Is it possible to get rid of it completely?
Yes. Possible to get rid of it completely. Why does it happen? The answer in Advaita Vedanta is due to ignorance. 3 levels you can take the answer. Shankaracharya's favorite phrase is avidya kama karma. Ignorance, desire and karma, action. By action we mean the things we have done and the results of those actions. So the first answer to your question, direct answer to your question and a deep answer is why are we like this? The answer is karma, causality. It's what we have constructed for ourselves in ancient lifetimes. So many lifetimes we have worked hard to build a miserable life for ourselves and we have got the result now. Whatever it is, good and bad, the mixture, it's something that we have constructed in past lives. That's the answer. But that's not the ultimate answer. You can ask, why at all is this chain of causality there? What's beyond this? Where did it start? What supports it? What's its reality? Well, the inner reality, he says, is desire. Avidya kama karma. Kama. At the root of causality is desire. I want and I get. So I want, and I want is kama. Then I engage in action. I do. The moment I engage in action, I set into motion an enormously powerful machine. That machine is called causality, work, action. Every action has its result. Every cause has its consequence. And once I set that into motion, I'm caught. That's why we are here today. So the deeper reason is desire. This is what the Buddha said. At the root of samsara is trishna, desire. But you go even deeper. Why is there desire at all? Is it a permanent condition? Is it incurable disease, desire? He says, no. One can go beyond desire. Proof. There are in the holy ones, enlightened ones, masters, all our teachings. In general, if you look at all the religions of the world, the spiritual core is that transcendence is possible, freedom is possible. So freedom from desire, freedom from causality is possible. How? Then what's deeper than desire? Why did this desire come in that case? And the answer is ignorance. Ignorance of our real nature. What is this real nature? This naked being, this existence, consciousness, bliss, which Meister Eckhart points at, which is the reality of God and our reality also. The moment we find that, we are set free. Notice he said, before God, when I looked at my bare being, he said 2 things. I had no want or desire there. So that is knowledge. Once one has knowledge and one finds that you don't have to attain it. It's already attained. It's already here right now. This is the truth right now. But we don't see it. later on in another place, Meister Eckhart puts it very beautifully. The least bit of holding on to something created obscures the whole of God. The ultimate reality about God. What does it mean? It's like the sun, which is so much bigger than the earth itself. But for us, from our perspective, the whole of the sun can be obscured by a small patch of cloud. If it comes between us and the sun, it can serve to obscure the sun. The sun is so much bigger than that cloud. The sun is so much bigger than the earth. So bright and powerful. But the whole thing can be obscured from our vision because of patch of cloud. Similarly, Meister Eckhart says, least holding on to. If you look at the created thing, it can obscure the whole of God. That is ignorance. And one can overcome that. That's why this path of knowledge.
Follow. Doesn't ignorance presuppose an individual? Because
yes. So, I, the individual, am ignorant. Which was before? Am I individual before my ignorance? Am I ignorant before my individuality? If I say ignorance is before individuality, then ignorance will be in God, in the absolute. And if I say ignorance is after individuality, where did the individual come in that case? This is a question about, in Vedanta, this is worked out centuries, debate, question, answer, there are texts and texts on this. This is the question about, they say, avidya ashraya, the locus of ignorance. And I'll give you two answers. Locus of ignorance. If you say it is in God, it's like saying darkness is in the sun. It just makes no sense. And if you say that it is in the individual, then where did the individual come? The individuality of our individual is, the absolute has become an individual due to ignorance. So ignorance cannot be after the individuality. After we have become this, I am this miserable fellow, then ignorance has come. No, ignorance should be there before Brahman appears as the Jiva. So it seems that ignorance cannot be either in Brahman or in the Jiva. It both has defects. And there are two schools in Vedanta. There is what is called the Vivarana school, another one called the Bhamati school. And there are long discussions on these things. They have these two views. One view is ignorance is in Brahman, in the ultimate reality. But there it is not a defect. Ignorance is the power of Brahman. What is ignorance for us, delusion for us, is Shakti for Brahman. And there we are talking about Brahman as God, as Saguna Brahman, not the Absolute. In the Absolute there is no ignorance. But in God, so isn't it blasphemous to say there is ignorance in God? Well, it's not ignorance for God, it is power for God, it is Shakti. Sri Ramakrishna said the serpent is there. And with one bite it can knock out its prey, which is a rat or a mouse. With a little bit of the poison in its fangs, it can knock out a mouse or a rat. But all the poison is in the mouth or in the fangs of the serpent. It does not create any problem for the snake. It is the power of the snake. Similarly, the power of God is omniscient. It is creation of the entire universe. And a tiny bit of that power is enough to keep us in delusion, in ignorance. That's what makes the Absolute into individual beings. So it resides in the Absolute, not as Absolute qua Absolute. Absolute as the conditioned Absolute, Ishvara, Bhagavan, what he calls God within inverted commas, Meister Eckhart. In that Absolute, there is a saying, Mayadhish and Mayadhina, the Lord of Maya and under the domain of Maya. So we are Mayadhina, we are under the play of Maya, we are under the power of Maya. Brahman is the Lord of Maya, but both are conditioned by Maya. Beyond Maya is the Absolute Brahman, Sat-Chit-Ananda. So that is one answer. This is from the Vivarana school. The Bhamati school says, no, ignorance is in the individual being. Then how did the individual come into being with ignorance in the individual being? Because the individual then must have come into existence before the ignorance has come. So no, that's because of the ignorance in the past birth. But how did that ignorance come into being? That ignorance has come from the birth before that. And you'll say, then what about, so where is the beginning? And yes, you said causeless? Yes, that is the answer. From the Bhamati school, it says beginningless. Ignorance is beginningless. We might immediately say, hey, you are You are dodging the question. You are evading the question. What do you mean beginningless? Professor J.N. Mahanti, I have to mention him. He's a brilliant Indian philosopher, but he was also a brilliant German philosopher. So he, when India became independent, 1947-48, around that time, he had mastered the Nyaya school, Vedanta. He was studying in the university, Calcutta University, but he did something none of his colleagues did at that time. They all went on to jobs in the newly independent India. He came to Germany. He said, I've learned enough of Indian philosophy, but let me learn something different now. And who are the greatest philosophers in the world? Germans. So he said, let me go to Germany. I think he came to Göttingen. And the philosophy which appealed to him most was Husserl's phenomenology. And he became so good at it, such an authority in it, that at least in English, if you see books on phenomenology, there will always be 1 or 2 articles by J.N. Mahanti. He went on to become a noted scholar of both Indian and Western philosophy. And he taught in US. He passed away just 2 years ago. Now, why I'm mentioning this is, years ago, in our Institute of Culture in Calcutta, in a Vedanta class, when he said this, ignorance is beginningless. We looked puzzled. What do you mean ignorance is beginningless? How can something be beginningless? He said, no, actually it is not just ignorance about Brahman. Any ignorance is beginningless. What do you mean? He said, do you speak German? Sprechen Sie Deutsch? I mean, look, what? So you don't know German? No. You are ignorant of German? Yes. When did the ignorance of German start? Well, from my birth, I have been ignorant of German. Oh, so before your birth, you knew German? No. Then your ignorance of German is beginningless. And when you go to the, what are those institutes where you learn? Goethe Institute in Calcutta and all this. I think Max Miller Bhavan or something. Goethe Institute, the Goethe Institute. If you go there and take a course in German, slowly your ignorance will go away. And then so the ignorance of German is beginningless. The ignorance of physics is beginningless, unless you have a degree in physics. The ignorance of Sanskrit grammar is beginningless. When knowledge comes, it removes beginningless ignorance. Similarly, our ignorance of our real nature is beginningless. And it's a very reasonable thing to say. It's not unreasonable. So, both answers are possible. There is a third answer. The question is, where is ignorance? The third answer is, the question is wrong. This is the answer given by the Vartikakara, Sureshwaracharya. He says, ignorance is not a reality which will have a locus. Ignorance is something that we have posited in our state of ignorance. When we realize the reality, after all, it's logical. What does Advaita Vedanta say is the reality? It is non-dual existence, consciousness, place. Non-dual, no second. Therefore, there cannot be anything called ignorance. In the state of ignorance, we will put up a quantity x, ignorance, and solve the equation. Then we realize there is nothing like that. Once you have got non-dual Brahman, the problem of ignorance has gone away. Notice, on our side, there is no answer to this question. On the side of the enlightened one, there is no question also. They have the answer, but no question. No enlightened person ever says, I have realized the absolute. But that ignorance, that problem I have not solved. No, they don't have that problem at all. That's on our side, not in the side of, it looks like artificial intelligence. Yes. Somebody else was raised. Yeah. So the gentleman here, you have to be aggressive about raising your hand.
Thank you. Thank you for the speech. Was really interesting. So I suppose my question is around the dynamism.
Yeah.
What I mean is that I think I have a lot of threads in my head that I'm trying to pull, and they all revolve around this idea. So, for instance, you have mentioned a quote from Eckhart with regards to doing.
Yes.
And as well as before, you were also mentioning the idea of omnipotence that is sort of pointless where there is nothing to do.
Yeah.
At that more of an ontic ground.
Yes.
So, yes, so I guess I have a few problems with squaring that circle in a way of I want to save the word, the dynamism that I see in the world, yet I have the intuitive understanding of what you mean at that ontic ground of a still ground. So,
yes.
Do you have any comment on that?
That's a very good question and a very natural question to have. What about activity? What about You're saying that there is an ultimate ground beyond all attributes, as he said, beyond all modes, beyond all power, beyond all qualities, beyond all action. Then what happens to this world of action, power? It remains exactly as it is. In fact, Vivekananda says, it actually Advaita, non-duality, does not dismiss the world, it explains the world. So, after this enlightenment, what happens? As you see, Eckhart himself says, nobody is excused from action. You will never reach a state of perfection where you are excused from action. But the beauty of it will be, the sage can, from the higher perspective, being engaged in tremendous action, can say, I do nothing. The world is maintained. Names and forms are everything goes on, but everything now is seen in this divine light. The ontic ground is not a static ground. It seems like that when we contrast it with the world of action. Rather, it is the ground from which springs both rest and action. In Vedanta, what is rest? The period between creation and destruction. After destruction and before the new creation. That is the static. After creation, it is dynamic. Then it again comes back to the static. This series of manifestation and unmanifest. From unmanifest to manifest, from manifest back to unmanifest. This is how the world appearance goes. And the world appearance, we may not like the term the world appearance. So everything is dismissed. No, not everything is dismissed. You are the absolute ground of this world. So you have the reality and you have the appearance also. The appearance is seen as a manifestation of that reality. If one does not like the idea of falsity of the world appearance, does not like the term appearance, you want this to be real. Yes, in fact there are Advaitic saints who say this idea that the world is false is a method of coming to that ontic ground. It's a coming to that realization of the absolute. After you realize the absolute, you can say this is a manifestation of the absolute. In fact, Gaudapada, Shankaracharya's teacher's teacher, when he is asked, what is all this? If this is the absolute, then, but why all this? He says, this is the nature of that luminous one. Devasya esha svabhavayam. This is the nature of the absolute to shine forth in these ways. It itself is the absolute. Or as Nagarjuna, few hundred years before Gaudapada, says that samsara and nirvana are exactly the same. In Tibetan Buddhist terms, on the primordial ground of being, sounds like Meister Eckhart, doesn't sound like the Buddha or Buddhism. On the primordial ground of being, under ignorance, it shines forth as samsara. In enlightenment, the same thing shines forth as nirvana. Yeah. Last question, we have run out of time.
Just going back to the previous question, your answer is through the karma perspective, which is not present in the Christian tradition.
Yes,
so
karma,
my question
causality.
Is, yes, how would Eckhart, who was in the Christian tradition, deal with this question of beings popping up and maybe gaining more knowledge or polishing ignorance and attaining salvation in Christian terms? How would Eckhart deal with this process? And another, just very quick, there is the idea in Eckhart and in Hindu mysticism also that language is insufficient to describe the absolute. How
yes.
to deal with his provocative statements?
Yes. So the question had two parts. The first part is easy. I don't know. You'll have to ask a Meister Eckhart scholar how. There is a traditional church doctrine about it. It's God's creativity, and this is what is the result. That's why this is happening. And there is free will. It's also the reason why we are suffering in this way, the good and the bad. It's all due to human free will. What does Eckhart make of it? I'm sure he has some deep insight into it. Leave it there, because I'm not the person to answer that. The second part of it, right, Eckhart says it is beyond conceptions, beyond the power of language to express it. Literally, the same phrase is used in Advaita Vedanta. It is used in Mahayana Buddhism, that reality escapes language. Remember, in Indian philosophy, you had the whole spectrum. There were realists like the Nayayikas who said what is captured in language is reality. If you say reality escapes language, then what you're talking about is unreal. What language and reality, they map. What is real is expressible in language. And in contrast to that, the Buddhist philosophers came and said that what language expresses is precisely the unreal. It cannot capture reality. And Advaita Vedanta is on that side of the divide. Advaita Vedanta says the ultimate reality, this absolute, is beyond thought and beyond language. But if you say it's beyond thought and beyond language, all of this is language. What I did till now is language. This is language. Upanishads are language. So what do you do then? So they have a whole theory of how to express the inexpressible. You cannot directly speak about it. It's there in Christian mysticism also. It is called the via negativa. If you cannot say what a thing is, you can say what it is not. You can operate around it, keep excluding, so that one may intuitively grasp it. And here again, Eckhart would be very happy, because if you keep saying not this, the Sanskrit neti neti, at one point you will intuitively grasp it, precisely because you are it. And it is self-revealing and self-luminous. It should be obvious at one point. Oh, I am that, because you are it. If it was something other than you, and you keep saying no, 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 you might not get it at all, what we are talking about. So they develop these strategies. One strategy is the via negativa. In Sanskrit, this is called the neti neti approach. Not this, not this. But there are other strategies also. Contradictory language. It's farther than the farthest, nearer than the nearest. It moves and it moves not. Eckhart uses that sometimes. This contradictory language. Another strategy is to use parables and tales, like I used the example of the actor being or metaphors like snake and rope. And this is sort of metaphorical way of expression. Another way is, I actually hinted at that at the beginning. That's very technical. It's called the way of implied meaning. Lakshana, lakshya lakshana bhava. Directly language cannot express, but indirectly it can imply something. The power of implication is used. So when you are that, tattvamasi, the direct meanings of you and that, individual being, God, they cannot be one. But the implied meaning of you and the implied meaning of God, there's a whole process by which they do. This is called the process of inquiry into those great sentences. So the whole process will take you step by step. There are three major steps to be overcome. Then you come to this implied meaning. The implied meaning is that one common ground, that existence, that bare existence or bare awareness. And then it seems Eckhart has got a new strategy. Apart from not this, apart from contradictory or paradoxical language, apart from implied meaning, apart from storytelling, one more new strategy Eckhart has got: provocative language. By seeing God, even a fly will not be satisfied. God is nothing, but not that in the sense of having no being. It's not this thing or that thing. He's saying exactly the same thing, but he first shocks. He hits you with a hammer. And it's much more shocking to, say, the Christian theist or the theologically trained Christian in the 13th century, rather than our more. Today we have two things. One is, don't believe so much in all this. So you are safe because of not commitment or belief. You don't get shocked. But then the provocative nature loses its power also, if you don't believe at all. One way is to build up a system and then smash it, hoping you'll be released from that. And so that's another strategy that about language which Eckhart has developed. Thank you for telling me, because I was thinking this may be a strategy, or deliberately shocking and then pointing to something as a way out of that shock. Thank you so much.